currently I'm on a masculine cleanse, is what I call it, to do a little dating detox. Am I even dateable? Like, does anybody even like me? It's built on somebody else's brand. Like, build your own brand. How on earth am I going to do this? Hello, and welcome to episode 1 of Bless Your Heart podcast. We finally made it here. I know I've been really pumping this up for quite a long time, and it's taken me a while, honestly, to just launch this whole thing because I've got a lot of things going on. If you know me personally, then you know all the different plates that I'm spinning and all the different balls that are in the air and juggling. So, a little bit about me, if you haven't heard my story or don't know anything about me, I am a mom of 5 kids. One's almost actually an adult. So I have a 17, 16, 15, 13, and 11-year-old. So we've kind of gone through a lot of these stages and ages and stages. I have experience as being a stay-at-home mom, but I also have a salon. And I opened that up during the pandemic. So there's a big, crazy story attached to that as well. And then also I'm a divorced mom. So I'm single and out there living this like crazy dating world, trying to navigate that as well. So a little bit about what this podcast is going to be about. All of those things, actually. So that's what I'm really excited about. I'm trying to keep it as authentic as possible and just, about my story. One thing that I will tell you is I've had a lot of pressure and I've had a lot of people, that I've talked to trying to figure out, what do I tell? What do I not tell? Just, using, proper discretion as far as, I have 5 kids that I know some of their friends are going to be listening to all this stuff. And so I had to keep all of that in mind too. And so one thing I can tell you is this is my opinion. Okay, and as far as I'm concerned, this is being recorded in America, and I have a right to my opinion, and I want to voice my opinion about all different sorts of matters. So if there's ever a subject or something that you flat out don't agree with me about, then by all means, feel free to have your opinion. That is not something that I'm trying to change. I'm not trying to tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing. I'm just telling you based on my experience and what I have learned through all the things I've been journeying, going through. This is the conclusion that I came to. And this is kind of, the things that I'm learning. I'm still learning too. I'm not a pro at any part of this. I mean, please, I know that there are some people that are probably, momming better than others. Let's be honest, and then there's, people who are still just, learning and, there's no professional parent out there and there's tons of opinions. I mean, I posted something on my Instagram and I had so many opinions about my water bottle that I was drinking out of. And, that's fine. I mean, by all means, but, hey, maybe through the course of some of our small chats, you can get me to know a little bit more about recycling. I mean, I'm not against it. I'm not somebody who wants to harm my planet, and I'm not somebody that wants to, destroy my children's, psyche. I'm actually trying really, really hard to make it better. But that's one thing that I've noticed by just putting myself out there through either my salon and, all the different clients that come into my chair. I encounter all sorts of different opinions. It is kind of funny though. What I've realized is, the thing about, sometimes taking a side to polarizing issues that I really like is that you start to attract the people around you that also have those opinions. And usually they're, being like-minded like you, they usually share a lot of your similar interests and things that you, uphold and, mission statements that you agree with. So I feel like, that's one thing that I'm hoping to do with this podcast too, is, if you're looking for a call me daddy, which I don't know if anybody, here, any of my listeners are going to be also following that page. I'm sure there's going to be a few. It's an entertaining podcast that's out there, extremely, extremely successful. Maybe even the number 1, I don't know. But this is not that. I want this podcast to be something that you can put on and listen in front of your children. And, because as a busy mom, whenever I had kids, the only time I could listen to audiobooks and things of that nature was in the car whenever I had my kids there. Maybe if they were napping in the car, but I wasn't, going to be listening to some, rated, M for mature audience, thing in the car. And that's how I choose to raise my children. I want to have, a very wholesome, a wholesome surrounding and things like that. I mean, raising them that way, I feel like they're really good kids and they've done, really well for themselves and they have a really good head on their shoulders as well. So, this is going to be a podcast that you can put on and you can listen to it around your family. If it's going to be a subject that might be a little bit more, I will be sure to tell you and let you know, like, hey, this one's about dating. I won't go into crazy detail about certain things just because, like I said before, I have kids and I don't want to expose certain, details that I feel like still need to be only between me and kind of the situation that I was in at the time. But, I feel like I have a lot to share as far as kind of my journey of, how I've navigated life. And I feel like that because through working and talking with a lot of people, a lot of my clients, I didn't even realize like any of the information that I had, and any of my words were valuable until I started talking to my clients and I started, getting text messages from people saying how much that really helped them. And this is like, therapy. And now they start calling me the therapist. So, I mean, it's definitely, a title that I feel very proud to wear because, I like to think that I've learned and I like to think that, a lot of the things I have learned are valuable. And so I'm hoping that I can share that with you guys so that maybe I can affect, more people out there and help more people out there. And also in return, have a relationship, a virtual relationship with a lot of people that are out there in this world. That's one thing is my time is so limited because of all the projects that I do have going on, is that a lot of my friendships have been more virtual at times because, between, running a business that's a brick and mortar business with employees, I have employees. And so, I'm juggling a lot, just structuring that and keeping that going and trying to constantly evolve that. And then also just my home life with my 5 kids and juggling that and still managing, trying to co-parent with somebody. And that's another thing, I had a lot of pressures and a lot of people that were super concerned about what this podcast was going to be about whenever I talk about divorce. And, and some of my hashtags have been about like abuse and things of that nature. And, I'm going to talk about my side of the story, and I would encourage, everybody to understand that, there's 2 sides to every story. So I'm not saying that, this is my version of my truth. And I at that same time, don't want to be putting out a lot of negativity about things that happen with me and my ex because I just don't feel like that's really worth anything. I don't feel like just staying in the negativity and talking about it and like making him out to be like this terrible person is really in anybody's best interest. Obviously not his, but definitely not mine either. And not in my kids' best interests, as well. So I'm not going to be over here talking about like, really focusing in on his character or what I feel about him. I have my opinions about it. I have really had a really rough go around. I believe my divorce wasn't as ordinary as other ones that I've talked to. Of course, a lot of the people in my world actually aren't divorced. I have a lot of friends that are moms, and from my, kids' friends, parents, and things like that. And they're very much in beautiful, healthy marriages. And most of the time I'm, going out on dates with people that obviously aren't married now, but might have gone through a divorce. And, they they've had kind of ranged from all sorts of things, from being cheated on and just terrible background stories. And, as far as I know, there are certain things like that never took place in my marriage, so, I don't feel like, I lived like the worst of the worst marriage. However, there was definitely things that I felt like really traumatized me. I mean, I was traumatized by my marriage, and it was tough. It was really tough. I will take responsibility for a lot of the things that, went on during that and kind of that happened, and led up to that. So that is also something, because I want to help people. I think that's like the main focus of this is it's entertaining and it's so much fun. And a lot of these stories are really great. However, I hope you take away something from that you feel empowered by. If I constantly talked about how I was a victim of certain circumstances, then I don't feel like that really allows me to step out of the victim identity and into a better identity that's more empowered. And so that's one thing that I learned through all of this is, as long as you just really want to pick apart, like the bad and really focus on that, then you're going to end up stuck in that. And you're going to end up really deep seeding all of that information into your brain. And it's going to be a lot harder to shift out of that. So that's what I'm going to be trying to do is just, a lot of my stories are going to be, hey, this was the rough situation of it. This was the truth of it. And yet, this is also my takeaway, what I learned about that, how I use that to better myself, and that's your choice. That is your choice. I mean, that's like the main message that I've kind of tried to adhere by is, every day you wake up and you have a choice. I don't care if you're having a good week, a bad week, or a bad time in your life. I mean, everybody's going to be going through seasons that are ups and downs. And, the decisions that you make, every tiny little decision, will impact you in some way. I mean, that's a huge message. It's not a new message. It's not one that I've just, conjured up on my own. But I mean, that it's such a true message. And I feel like, when you get up and you listen to my podcast, I want you to feel whenever you turn it off, like I can do this, whatever it is you're doing, whether or not you're driving your kids to preschool. And the whole time in the morning, you were just thinking, I can't do this. I don't know how I'm going to do this. Because that is one thing as a mother, I think all mothers can relate to, is we have had those mornings where we wake up with just, this heaviness on top of us, where we're just kind of thinking, and, we're thinking all the time, how on earth am I going to do this? This day feels so big, and you just have to break it down into like one step at a time. Honestly, that's how I've had to play out so many things in my life. And I've often had just the biggest compliment of somebody telling me that there's so many people that will say things, that say they want to do things, but Laura, you're somebody who actually does those things. And I think it's because there's just certain moments like, well, first of all, you have to decide if it's something you really want. If it's something you truly, deeply want, then it's all about goal setting. It's all about like, how bad do you want it? Because what you do is going to show you how bad you want it. And what it all comes down to is a lot of people don't want it bad enough. And that's one thing that my parents, they've always been driven crazy by me in a lot of ways, because they would tell me, even when I was younger, whenever I wanted something, I hounded them. And once it was in my head, I couldn't get it out of my head. Like I was like, I'm getting that. Like that is what I'm doing. And this is what's going to happen. And I would just stop at nothing until I got that. And I was just very, very determined child, a very strong-willed child. And that translated, I feel sorry for my parents. I'm sorry, Mom. But that translated into my life now. And that, there are certain things in my life I really, really wanted. And after my divorce, when I opened up the salon that I opened up, when the pandemic came, I mean, that was an opportunity for me to say, I really, really want this. Because those of you who don't know my backstory, I got divorced in, it started in 2018 is whenever we both decided on getting divorced. But it was a 3-year long battle. Took everything out of me battle. And it basically left me in a financial situation where I was not in a good place. And I had to do something super big for my family in order for us to be okay. And not just be okay, what my version of that meant was I wanted my kids to have somewhat of a comparable life to the friends and community that they were already in. I mean, you want your kids to be a part of their friend group. And, if everybody's getting certain shoes, you want them to get certain shoes. And I know from a deeper spiritual perspective, you don't need those shoes, empower yourself and don't need the brands and don't need this. And I preach that to myself in a lot of ways. But also there's just something where you just kind of want to fit in too. You kind of want to be a part of that. So I kind of am on the fence about a lot of these things, and I don't let my kids get everything they want. And I try to tell them, really think about it. Why is it you want to purchase this thing? Is this because you're going to use this brand as part of your identity? Well, then let's kind of work on that. I don't want you to be so wrapped up in your identity is built on somebody else's brand. Build your own brand. And that's one thing I was really thrilled to do whenever I created my salon is I wanted to build my own brand and I wanted to be my own brand. So Glow Gal started as a result of me trying to take care of my family. And I wanted still to have the ability to financially be there, but then also have the flexibility to attend all the things for them because I had, most to their knowledge, stayed at home and was around them a lot and worked, whenever they were at school and things of that nature. And so whenever it was time for me to pick them up from school, I was the one picking them up from school. And I didn't want to let that go because that is one thing I super value is that time in the car, especially as they get older and they're starting to go through these more emotional woes in their life. That time in the car said everything. And I will never forget whenever I was up on the stand in court. And I'll just tell you this. When, everybody's fear in life, when you really listen to everybody talk about fears, their fear is to be judged. And getting up on the stand and being basically, your character is being ridiculed and, picked apart and you're having to prove who you are. First of all, I had to really know who I was. And my identity as a mother was really being, under a microscope. And so I was really fortunate to feel like at that point in my life, I was a good mom. And I was able to, when asked questions, really stand up and say, no, this is important. And I will never forget my ex's attorney telling me whenever I was trying to get full custody, my ex's attorney telling me, what does it matter, picking up the kids at school and it's not a necessary conversation. And I just looked at him and I had the most confident feeling in my heart because this is one truth I do believe in, is I said, that conversation leaving school might be one of the most important conversations you have of the whole entire day with your child. Your child has been subject to the outside world and outside influences for the whole entire day. They've had to reserve who they are, sit in observation, take in so much to process throughout that whole entire day that the second they get in your car, they get to just for a moment relax. And as I'm sure a lot of you mothers that are out there have experienced, sometimes that's when you get the whole car is bawling and everyone's losing their mind because they're finally at peace. They're finally in a comfortable place, a safe place. And unfortunately for us, that means that sometimes you get like all of the rawness of them and very vulnerable side of them. I remember whenever the kids were really little, I would stop by Starbucks and I'd always have to grab my coffee because I was like, I'm going to really need to be caffeinated for this, because when I pick up all 5 and they're all trying to tell me a story and they're all fighting for my attention, and then they're going to start like getting angry at each other and it's going to end in a fight. And sure enough, every ride home was somebody crying and somebody yelling at each other and me just kind of like listening to this complete chaos and mayhem going on in my car and just going, nope, this is a good thing. This is because you're a safe place. And through their teenage years, and including right now, even some of the stuff that I'm going through right now with my kids, remembering through divorce, through all these things, that sometimes their anger unleashed on you is because you are the safe place. And that is such a hard truth for a mom. I remember thinking all the time when my kids were young, when my ex-husband would go to work and he would come home and I'd say, you know how lucky you are to go to work and be told when you did your job correctly and you did a good job at your job, that you did a great job. You did so good. I said, because when you're a mom and you're disciplining your kids, if you're doing it right, when you're forming them, especially when they're younger, then they're mad at you. Like they hate you and they're just telling you how terrible of a mom you are. It's a very, very different experience. Like I don't get a Mom of the Year award because I disciplined my kids and I told them, force them, through just, okay, let's sit and let's reflect. Okay, don't do that. Well, now you're not going to get this and now you're not going to get this. And then they have the freak out and the whole tantrum. You don't get that from your boss. Well, I mean, maybe you do. I mean, I've heard some stories in salons. So maybe in some places you do. But, for the most part, like if you're doing your job and you're doing a good job, like you're going to be rewarded for that. But not necessarily in parenting. It's like a very delayed gratification. So, I mean, that's what makes our job just really difficult. But so we're going to be talking about, things of that nature, like motherhood. And then, of course, we're going to be talking about stories about dating because, all you single moms that are out there, you can relate to some of my stories and some of the ways that I've learned kind of how to navigate this. Like currently, I'm on a masculine cleanse, is what I call it, because I've decided, to do a little dating detox and kind of really focus in some things in my life right now. I always joke around and say, the ROI, the return of investment, wasn't going too well. So I decided, my time is super limited and I just wanted to make sure I was putting it in something that I really feel fulfilled me. And I just kind of started just hitting a wall and just kind of being like, I'm not even sure. I need to kind of reevaluate what it is I'm really wanting because, I've gone through these different stages post-divorce of dating where when you first, end your marriage, you kind of have this like validation wound that you're kind of navigating around and you're trying to fulfill, and you kind of are just like, am I even dateable? Like, does anybody even like me? Like, what is, and you kind of test the waters and you kind of go, oh, okay. But you might not necessarily at that moment be like ready for real, true connection. I mean, I've made some great friends through dating because it was revealed to me really that I didn't even know about this whole stage in post-divorce dating that exists. And I don't think everybody goes through that, but that's what I went through. And I know a lot of people do go through that. So I've heard it from a lot of women, and I think in the end, we all want to find our person, but we're not even aware whether or not we're ready for that or not. So just kind of navigating and those stages and identifying them. So identifying them and navigating those, like that's another subject that I want to be going, on all of my tangents and just discussing with you. And then of course, the difficulties of divorce and things that happened and things that I wish I would have known about it, all the way from the, mental side of it and the emotional side of it, and how it affects your psyche and how you can heal from that, all the way to, what are the tips and tricks and things that I really learned that I wish I also would have known, because had I known that, I could have better protected myself. Honestly, my divorce went terrible. Like, I mean, there's no other way to put it. Like, I mean, I've never heard anyone say like there's winning in divorce. I mean, I think everyone says like it's not about winning. There are no winners here, and I agree with that. I mean, nobody set out when you said I do to say I don't anymore. And so now that I am going down, or went down that path, man, there were times during that I just look at and just go, I don't even know how I handled that. I don't know, that was so difficult. Like I said, you go your whole life trying to keep yourself out of positions for you to be judged. And here you are on the stand and being just completely judged by a whole courtroom of people. And one person in there, the judge, has the ability and the power to change your life based on a narrative, whether it's true or not, to completely change your life. Like this moment, this 45 minutes that I'm being interrogated can, based on what I say and what I do during this time, can basically, and how these questions are asked and how you answer these questions. You're having to process this question and answer it, knowing and kind of evaluating at the time, like, what is this going to say about me? Is this going to reflect the truth of who I am? Like, is my response going to actually reflect the truth of who I am? After going through that experience, I think there's very few things that I'm fearful of. I think that's the good, like the silver lining of it all, is under that type of pressure, I was able to use a lot of these other coping skills that I learned throughout life and apply them during that time where I really needed to stay present, because you have so much cortisol that is pumping through your body when you are up on that stand. I can't even tell you. And for you to stay in your higher brain, your intellectual brain during that time, is probably one of the most challenging things I've ever done. And I can say that I definitely feel confident that I did a good job. Unfortunately, the lesson that I learned is it is all about your lawyers. And I know from probably some of my listeners that have gone through divorces, and you might not gone through the best of it, and you've gone through it and it just came out terrible. Maybe that's a lesson you learned. Or maybe you were on the other side of that and you were like, man, thank goodness I found this person. But do your due diligence. Okay. Do your due diligence. There we go. I said it. When you're picking out a lawyer, because that is going to be the thing that changes everything. Even if you have to interview and it costs you $400 per interview that you do, because a lot of these, you have to pay up front, like $250, I think it was, when I was first going through my divorce back in 2018. And then when I was trying to retain another lawyer, like more recently, it was like $480 for a consult fee. And I was like, I will say it's worth it. Like, ask around and try to, dwindle that down to where you're not having like 12, $400 consults. But it is the most important. Don't just Google it. I read, great reviews too. Like, I read such good reviews. And to be completely honest, I don't even know whether or not my lawyer was like supposed to be doing family law. Like, I don't even know. So I'm just saying, like, having a good lawyer really, really matters, because when you need somebody who knows how to navigate this, it's something I learned. Like, I was really naive going into that courtroom, and I knew who I was, and I felt like I didn't do anything that was going to, like, create me to be such a bad person, but they could create anything out of nothing. I mean, it was honestly an art that I've never seen before. And, it's crazy to me. So that was just a hard lesson that I learned, so, knowing about that and kind of how I did that. Also, you can look on my Instagram too, because I post a lot of a little bit, tidbits and stuff like that on there. So definitely make sure you follow me on Instagram at Bless Your Heart Podcast. And I have a website as well. And you can also interact with me, like any questions that you might have that you have about a subject that we talk about, like feel free anytime to reach out to me. It might take me a little bit to get back to you because like I said, I'm juggling a lot, but that's definitely one thing I want to do. I'm hoping, to kind of show you like also like business things too, like financially, like how do you support yourself? How do you create businesses? How do you do things of that nature? I mean, that's another scope and, feather in my cap that I guess I have is just from experiencing now my business, our opening day, we were mandated to shut down. The salon was because of COVID. And I didn't even get a lot of the advantages of, some of these SBA loans because I didn't qualify for them because we didn't have proof of, lost revenue. So just, that's a whole nother story about how we had to persevere. I had to persevere through all of this. I mean, I was at one point my only employee working for the salon, and I had to uphold this whole entire thing, including all of the overhead that was there. I mean, we didn't get cut any slack. I mean, you had bills to pay regardless. Everybody had their bills to pay, including mine. And so I had to just, figure it out, and I had to work a lot, way longer hours than normal. And I was absolutely exhausted. I mean, that in and of itself has trauma attached to it that honestly, I think like was just insane. I mean, I was running at a sprint pace, a marathon for years. But, we're about to be up upon our 5th year, or we might even be in our 5th year. Yeah, I guess I think it's in our already. We've been open for 5 years now. Jeez, I just realized that. That's crazy. And so, yeah, I mean, between all of that, it's been a journey. It's been a journey for sure. So I just can't wait to be sharing all this stuff with you guys. I think it's going to be really, really fun. I think we're going to have a good laugh from time to time because honestly, if you can't laugh at yourself and laugh at life, then what are you even here for? I mean, you're going to be living a very miserable existence. And at this point, there's been times in my life that have been so crazy that that's all I could do was laugh because it was almost just pure ridiculousness. And so, I'm going to share those moments with you. And if you have any, that you would like to share with me, please reach out to me. I would love to hear about them. But until next time, that's going to complete our first podcast. I'm going to always try to keep these as close to 30 minutes because honestly, we're busy. We're busy in our life. You're busy, I'm busy, and I want to make sure that I respect that for you. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And until next time, I look very forward to it, and I will see you then. All right. Have a good day.